On a stormy December day in 1900, the relief ship Hesperus approached the Flannan Isles, a remote cluster of rocks off Scotland's west coast. As it neared the lighthouse on Eilean Mòr, the crew expected to see the beacon shining brightly, a sign of safety for sailors. But instead, they found darkness. No light, no signal, no sign of life. When they landed, they discovered a scene frozen in time. Beds unmade, clocks stopped at 9 a.m., an uneaten meal on the table. But the three lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur, were nowhere to be found. What happened to them? Did they vanish into thin air? Or is there a more earthly explanation for their disappearance? The Flannan Isles, also known as the Seven Hunters, are a remote and windswept cluster of rocky islands situated in the Outer Hebrides, off the rugged west coast of Scotland. Shrouded in mist and mystery, these islands have long been a source of fascination for sailors and locals alike. The largest of the group, Eilean Mòr, rises dramatically from the churning Atlantic, its cliffs soaring 75 meters above the restless sea. Upon this forbidding outcrop stands the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, a solitary sentinel built to guard mariners from the perilous waters that swirl around the islands. Construction of the lighthouse began in 1895 and spanned 4 arduous years, with workers braving fierce gales and treacherous conditions to complete the project. The structure was designed by the renowned engineer David Alan Stevenson, whose family had a storied legacy of lighthouse building along the Scottish coast. The cost of this ambitious endeavour was £1,899, no small sum at the time, reflecting both the scale of the challenge and the determination to safeguard lives at sea. The lighthouse was first illuminated on December 7, 1899, casting its beam far across the waves and offering hope to ships navigating the hazardous channels nearby. For the keepers stationed on Eilean Mòr, life offered a curious blend of hardship and relative comfort. Their quarters, though isolated, were thoughtfully constructed, providing shelter from the elements and a measure of domestic routine. A remarkable cable-hauled railway had been installed, ingeniously designed to transport provisions and equipment up the steep, rocky cliffs from the landing place far below. Despite these innovations, the island remained an inhospitable and often forbidding place, where isolation was a constant companion, and the roar of the Atlantic winds and waves never ceased. The ever-present danger of the sea, combined with the remoteness of their post, meant that the keepers lived on the edge, protected by modern engineering, yet always at the mercy of nature's relentless power. James Ducat served as the principal keeper of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, a man widely regarded for his experience, reliability, and quiet authority. Ducat was no stranger to the harsh demands of life on remote outposts, and his reputation for discipline and sound judgment earned him the respect of both his colleagues and superiors. Working alongside Ducat was Thomas Marshall, one of the assistant keepers, whose record was more checkered. Marshall had previously incurred a fine after losing vital equipment during his duties, an incident that, while not uncommon on such exposed and challenging stations, had nonetheless marked him as someone who could at times be careless or unlucky. Despite this blemish, Marshall was diligent in his responsibilities, acutely aware of the trust placed in him to keep the light burning. Completing the trio was Donald McArthur, a man of a very different temperament. McArthur was temporarily filling in for a colleague who was out on sick leave, stepping into the isolated world of Eilean Mòr with a reputation for volatility. Known among his peers for a fiery disposition and a history of involvement in brawls, McArthur brought a certain edge to the close-knit group. On December 7th, 1900, Superintendent Robert Muirhead made his scheduled visit to the lighthouse, arriving to carry out an inspection and to speak with Ducat about the practical challenges they faced, including the persistent, enveloping mist that often rendered the island invisible from the sea. Muirhead found the station in proper order, and his conversations with Ducat touched on the everyday difficulties of maintaining the light in such a remote and unforgiving location. As the superintendent departed, he could not have known that he would be the last person to see Ducat, Marshall, and McArthur alive. The transatlantic steamer Arctur was sailing through the dangerous waters near the Flannan Isles on December 15, 1900, a night when storms were raging. This passage is known for its hidden rocks and unpredictable weather. As the ship got closer to the islands, crew members nervously looked into the dark, hoping to see the reassuring flash of the lighthouse beam that should have cut through the darkness. They only found darkness, though. The light on Eilean Mòr, which was very important for navigation, was dark for no reason. The captain, who knew how dangerous this was for ships in the area, especially as the weather got worse, carefully wrote down what happened, noting that the beacon that so many sailors relied on was missing. The Archter finally docked at Leith on December 18th. The captain's report was quickly sent to the Northern Lighthouse Board, which worried those in charge of keeping Scotland's remote beacons safe. But a series of non-stop winter storms hit the coast, making it impossible to respond right away. The relief ship Hesperus, which was supposed to bring supplies and a new crew to Eilean Mòr, was stuck in port for almost a week and couldn't leave. The weather didn't get better until December 26th, when the Hesperus was able to brave the rough Atlantic and make the dangerous trip to the lighthouse. The relief crew felt uneasy as the Hesperus got closer to the island. There was no usual flurry of activity, like a flag fluttering from the flagstaff, keepers waiting at the landing to greet them, and the usual signals of welcome. Instead, there was only silence. There were no flags flying, no figures on the cliffs, and their signals went unanswered. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, got more and more worried and offered to go ashore and look into it. He climbed up the steep, slippery path to the lighthouse and found the main door locked. This made him even more worried. The building was eerily quiet inside. The beds, which were usually made up with military precision, were found unmade, as if the people who slept in them had left in a hurry or had never come back from an important job. The clock on the wall had stopped at 9 a.m., and the meal on the table had not been eaten. The three men who should have been taking care of the light were nowhere to be found. Moore looked in every room and called out their names, but all he heard was his own voice echoing back and the distant cries of seabirds. The last entry in the logbook, from December 12th, said that the lamp had been cleaned and wound, which were normal tasks that didn't suggest anything bad was going to happen. Aside from the constant wind, the loud calls of gulls flying around above, and the waves crashing against the rocky cliffs, the rest of the island was just as empty. In the aftermath of the disappearance, the Northern Lighthouse Board moved swiftly to launch a formal investigation, determined to uncover what had happened to the missing keepers. The inquiry was placed in the capable hands of Superintendent Robert Muirhead, a man intimately familiar with both the workings of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse and the personalities of its staff. Muirhead, who had last seen James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur during his routine visit earlier that month, approached the task with a mix of professional rigor and personal concern. Upon his arrival at Eilean Mòr, Muirhead conducted a meticulous examination of the lighthouse and its surroundings. His attention was quickly drawn to the West Landing, the most exposed and treacherous part of the island. Here, the evidence painted a picture of recent violence. A massive stone, once securely lodged, had been dislodged and shifted from its resting place, suggesting the impact of immense natural force. Iron railings lining the landing were twisted and bent, some torn from their anchors, while ropes and crates lay strewn about haphazardly, as if tossed by furious winds or waves. The supply crane stood damaged, its base wrenched and splintered. It was clear that the keepers had faced a formidable struggle against the elements. Piecing together the clues, Muirhead arrived at the official conclusion that a sudden catastrophic event had occurred, most likely that an unusually large wave, perhaps a so-called freak wave, had crashed over the landing, while the men were attempting to secure equipment or rescue supplies in the face of worsening weather. The theory held that one of the keepers, possibly drawn to the exposed landing by the urgent need to safeguard precious gear, had been caught off guard and swept away by the sea. The others, driven by duty or camaraderie, may have rushed to his aid, only to be overwhelmed themselves by the relentless, surging water. Yet, even as this explanation was put forth, it was accompanied by troubling inconsistencies. Contemporary records and local accounts gave no indication of an especially severe storm in the area at the time of the disappearance. The Atlantic was known for its unpredictability, but nothing in the weather logs suggested the sort of extraordinary conditions required to produce the destruction observed at the landing. Furthermore, the stark absence of any physical remains — the bodies of the three men were never recovered, despite extensive searches — cast a lingering shadow over the official findings. The lack of a definitive answer, coupled with the strange details and the island's brooding isolation, ensured that the fate of the Flannan Isles Keepers would remain an enigma, fueling speculation and legend for generations to come. Many theories came up in the years after the strange disappearance in an effort to figure out what happened to the 3 lighthouse keepers on Eilean Mòr. Because the island was so far away and there was no clear evidence, people were free to guess what had happened. Each guess showed how worried and imaginative the people who thought about the mystery were. One of the oldest and most popular theories is that the keepers were fighting with each other. Some people think that a heated argument may have turned into a physical fight that ended in tragedy, with the men falling from the cliffs into the churning sea below. This is because Donald McArthur has a history of being volatile and getting into fights. This scenario makes sense given how people are and how stressful it can be to work in such a remote location, but there has never been any solid proof that it happened. Some other explanations have gone into the realm of the supernatural, using the rich folklore of the Scottish Islands. The Hebrides have long been home to stories of sea monsters, ghosts, and otherworldly powers. It was probably only a matter of time before these stories became linked to the Flannan Isles mystery. Some people said that horrible creatures were coming up from the depths to take the keepers, while others said that angry spirits or curses were attached to the lonely rock. But even though these stories are creepy, there is no real proof that they are true. They are more like expressions of people's fears than realistic accounts of what happened. Another theory suggests that the keepers may have left the island on their own, possibly taking advantage of a passing ship's chance to escape their lonely life. But this theory falls short when you look at the harsh realities of the Flannan Isles geography and the careful records kept by ships that pass by. This scenario is very unlikely because it is very hard to get to the island, and there is no evidence that anyone planned to leave. No missing personal items, no reported sightings. For a long time, there were rumors about what was in the lighthouse logbook. Some stories said that the last entries talked about strange and scary behavior by the keepers. These stories say that MacArthur was seen crying, and all 3 men were said to be praying together, feeling like they were about to die. These vivid stories added a psychological drama to the mystery, but further investigation showed them to be false, not found in official records, and probably the result of overactive imaginations or intentional exaggeration. Even though there are a lot of theories out there, the most believable one is still that it was a tragic maritime accident. Most likely, a wave that was bigger than expected swept the men off the west landing as they were trying to secure equipment during bad weather. But because there are no direct witnesses or physical evidence, the exact order of events may never be known for sure. The Flannan Isles Disappearance has fascinated the public for over 100 years, and its shadow can be seen in books, songs, and movies. Wilfred Wilson Gibson's haunting poem, Flannan Isle, made the creepy scene that the relief crew saw famous. It captured the feeling of emptiness and unanswered questions that still surround the story. The mystery has also inspired other works of art, such as Peter Maxwell Davies's opera, The Lighthouse, which looks at the psychological stress of the keepers, and the movie The Vanishing, which came out in 2018, and adds its own twist to the story. Every new generation finds the story again because of how mysterious it is and how beautiful the setting is. Despite all the investigations and speculations, the fate of the 3 lighthouse keepers remains unknown. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse continues to stand, a silent witness to one of the greatest maritime mysteries of all time. As Wilfred Wilson Gibson wrote, "Aye, though we hunted high and low, and hunted everywhere, of the 3 men's fate we found no trace of any kind in any place, but a door ajar, and an untouched meal, and an overtoppled chair." Perhaps some secrets are meant to stay buried in the depths of the sea,